if we do a prototype for a bike and we get it on set and they're like, you guys spent 2 months doing this? Doesn't look like you did anything. Looks like it's out of the showroom. And we're like, yes. The movie's gonna be great. I wish I could talk about it because it's gonna be awesome.
Hi, welcome to Moto Tribe. I'm Laura Kraft.
Red Spade.
Sarah Merrill.
And today we have the pleasure of talking with Justin Kell. Justin has graciously agreed to let us interview him. He is the owner of Glory Motor Works. You have seen his work in major motion pictures. Thank you for joining. You are the motorcycle action coordinator and stunt performer, but that doesn't capture it all. You work with movie and TV producers to line up and sometimes create the perfect motorcycle for a film. A few of the notable movies that you've done are Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, The Matrix, Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, a few of the Marvel movies, and the upcoming Top Gun Maverick film, which we're not going to talk about today. But for the audience, how did you get into this niche field? Was it something that you sought out?
No, it's funny because, when I talk to people about what I do, whether it's sort of press related or industry or like a new neighbor or somebody you just, meet casually, they're like, what do you do for a living? I'm like, well, I do this motorcycle thing in movies. And then it's always followed up like, how do you start doing that? And you don't. There's a lot of jobs in the film industry that people find themselves in that it just kind of happens by accident. Like you get pushed by the universe into where it is. Like with me, I opened up an antique store in 1999, right? But, not old lady doily antique store. It was all big industrial stuff, neon signs, vintage motorcycles, sort of 50s furniture. Me and my wife opened it up. It was just the stuff we really liked. I was in Los Angeles working for a really high-end, great antique dealer, and I decided I wanted to go off and do my own thing. And because it was all the stuff we liked, there was always lots of vintage bikes in the shop, and helmets and that kind of thing. And the visibility of that shop, it was on Hollywood Boulevard in a section of Los Angeles called Los Feliz. So you drive down Hollywood Boulevard, and there'd be these great big windows with bikes and mechanical craziness going on. That would mean people started calling me going, hey, we're doing this thing. We need an old Triumph. And it sort of develops into that. What happened pretty early on is I'd go onto these jobs and realize that the departments that were building the motorcycles and supplying them for films were mostly car guys, right? So they're guys that would build picture cars and stuff, and they're great at it, but not having the sort of knowledge base as a rider and being able to do stunts to know what the machine was going to need to be set up to do those things. Our stunt departments were handed inferior equipment to do their job. So that's sort of how my little world started. Like, okay, you're going to do a 100-foot jump, and here's what we're going to need to do, and we'll set up the bikes that way, and then we'll have this bike for that gag, that one. So it was a total unplanned thing, and it just happened that way.
That's cool. So speaking of that, how do motorcycles get chosen for a movie? And actually, how much input do you have? Do you modify the hell out of them? And what all goes into that?
Well, like there's a whole bunch of different ways it happens. Each show is different. Sometimes we'll be at the very beginning of a project. And they're like, right, here's the action we want to see. What should we use? And we'll figure out the bikes that are best suited. But that part of the process has to work hand in hand with our production designers and directors. The production designer is the guy that's in charge of really the overall feel and look of the film. So he might write in this bike down to the last detail in a script and a treatment. So you read that, and then we'll have 3D modelers or storyboard guys draw the bikes up, and I look at it, and it's this crazy thing, and they say, "Can you guys make this?" And I look at it and go, "Absolutely." And then I go back to the shop and go like, "I don't know, let's figure it out." Sometimes we have to send stuff away. Like, we were doing one film, and they really wanted inline 3-wheel motorcycle and do a bunch of stunts. I was like, "We can't do it. It's not going to work." And they just couldn't. And finally, like, I was like, "Okay, how am I going to explain this?" And we took a pair of rollerblades and went, "Look what happens when you do a turn with inline wheels, right? With suspension, we're going to build a death machine, and it just won't work." So then you adapt from that. Okay, how do we get across the sort of visual elements that we were going for in that, which is really one of my favorite things about doing this. We get handed these design projects and problems that, like if you handed this to an OEM, they would have 5 years to develop this bike and prototypes and stuff. We do it in 6 weeks, and then we immediately take that machine and put it into sort of action sequences and riding scenarios where you would never even get close to that, testing a bike for a company. So I'm able to really put these things through the process, and it's like we're on a reality show. Some sort of every job we're like, this has got to be a joke. How can we possibly, like, each job you seem to be getting less time. Some aren't all like that, but you get on jobs where you just, I'll come in and tell the guys in the shop, like, right, we're in fishing boat mode, which means get all your personal stuff taken care of this weekend because we're going to be 24/7 working for the next month.
Wow.
But that was the long way of saying sometimes I pick, sometimes, it's written into the script, that's that detail written. And then there's other times where we adapt something based on a product placement deal, because it's very, it's good marketing money to spend to get a film in a feature, or your bike in the feature film. You figure, what's it cost to buy a 30-second ad on national television? It's a lot. You can spend, most times less money and have your motorcycle on a film that, as far as we know, will be around until you can't watch films anymore. So it really is money well spent, and it depends how it gets worked into the story.
Speaking of which, don't you get some pre-production bikes that you use on sets?
Yeah, that's fun. It happens a lot. Sometimes there are prototypes already built by factories. Sometimes they're not done yet, so we have to build them because we can do it quicker. It's easier for me to build a bike from scratch that a company's working on than it is for them. I don't have EPA regulations to worry about. I don't have, 500 guys sitting at a big table wanting to know what's going on. We just go, right, okay, go. And we make it. And so there's a lot of freedom in that, Sometimes we get handed finished products in the prototype form, and that's pretty great too. Like when we did, Avengers 2, we had, I think there was either 8 or 10 prototypes of the Harley Davidson Livewire in existence. And honestly, at that point, most of the people that worked at Harley didn't know they existed. It was really kept that far under wraps. So we go off to shoot in Korea, and out of all the prototypes that are on the planet, I have half of them over there. So that was a fun job because we didn't know what they were going to do. We didn't know what we were going to be able to do with them, with the stunt sequences. we ended up getting over there and rewriting the engine controls a little bit to make them a lot less safe. You know, there's electric motor with the torque that's on those bikes. If you're not toning that down and dialing it back, you know, you can just grab a handful and flip the bike over. There's so much torque. So we were able to play around with that, and it was we went there with our doubts. I gotta be honest. Like, I thought it was cool. Like, I remember sitting in the meeting in Milwaukee, and they're like, "Okay, here's what we've got going. We made an electric bike," and I was just like, "Awesome!" I was so stoked. You know, and they're like, Harley got a lot of pushback from it. You know, but when I saw it and was in the development, like, I was really stoked. I'm like, all right, Harley, like, going for it. You know, they were progressing, and it was a great machine, and it still is. The production ones are great. A little different than what I used, but you know, we were able to work out some of the bugs of the production or of the prototype bikes. Like, I knew after filming that if you were going to ride that bike down a giant flight of stairs, you're probably going to pop one of the belts off the pulley. So we figured out how to keep that from happening. You know, that kind of stuff. And you're not going to know that like when you're prototype testing a bike. You know, and I remember the guys at Harley went through the engine, you know, sort of the computer after we finished. They were just like, "Oh my God, what were you guys doing?" You know, and we had this girl, Sarah Zia, a French girl riding, who could control a motorcycle unlike I've ever seen. I've worked with some of the best riders in this business, and Sarah's just a couple steps. She's insanely good. And, you know, having a mixture of that great machine, that good of a rider, and a written sequence that was going to be so cool. Like, that's when it all sort of checks the boxes, and, you know, it's going to be a great piece of film. And it was a good chase, that thing.
So how far in advance did you have the bike before it got released? Did you have to keep the bike in some sort of secure location where people weren't taking pictures and it wasn't getting out?
Well, yeah. I mean, while we were working with that bike in Korea, we had private security on set, you know, that was hired a Korean firm. It was great. They were like the Korean Men in Black guys. They were these big Korean dudes. They all had black Wayfarers on, black suits. They were badass. And they would, if somebody took a picture, they'd grab the phone, right? So whenever we'd be taking the bike around, those guys would be beside us. We'd try and, you know, travel it, move it to set, covered. Like, we did a pretty good job. There was, you know, hardly any paparazzi or shots of that bike got out, which is really stressful because, you know, the motorcycle industry didn't know that bike existed. Nobody did, you know. But I can remember one day we're in the middle of this big shopping district in Seoul, and, you know, there's just tons of people looking out of buildings, and we're just like, oh no. We're trying to keep the bike covered, and we're doing good, and we're like kind of all sitting there like, okay, we got this under control. And then we like hear a bunch of stuff, and we turn around, and a bus had stopped behind us, and everybody was hanging out with their cameras. But, you know, people in that situation are more interested in the star of the film than the thing. So even as the first photos were leaking from the set, and some had the bike in it, it never really made its way over into the motorcycle press. So we kind of slipped through like that. You know, we just we just finished. Well, we didn't just finish it. It just got released. Free Guy, which we shot in Boston with Ryan Reynolds, and we had the V4 Ducati Street Fighter prototypes for that. And we knew that was going to be great. And where we were doing our stunt rehearsals and testing and stuff, we were completely hidden. So we didn't have to worry about it in a situation like that, you know. And sometimes we just build them from scratch. We've had to do that for Harley. We've had to do it for Triumph. We've had to do it for quite a few companies, you know, and we get as close as we can with what's available.
You build bikes for those companies?
Well, Yeah, if we're doing a film and the bikes aren't ready yet, the prototypes, for instance, that becomes our job. Okay, let's see what you got. We'll get handed the models for the bikes, the 3D models of the bikes, and we'll build them. We're not casting engines for the companies, but sometimes we have to assemble bikes that aren't ready yet out of different bikes out of the same company, and it's fun.
That is wild. Wow, very
I
insightful.
remember what we're doing is generally the thing that we're building here in the shop will get seen for a really quick burst, and it's rare to have like a good tight beauty shot or something where the bike's stationary. So you have to think about that as we're going. We try and get into like we call it sort of bolt head. Like that's how deep we want to go. We want to make sure every bolt head, every screw is correct, as if somebody would focus in on it. And it's a good mindset to be in when you're doing these builds. But the reality is you can get away with a lot because the nature of what we do is movement. And there's other things. You're following a story, you're watching an actor, you're looking over here. The only after the film's released for a while, that's when the internet attacks us after people have had time to say, oh, look at that. And sometimes we get away with it and nobody notices.
So I actually have a follow-up question to that because there's been a few movies, and I can't think of them off the top of my head right now, but I have been watching some motorcycle sequences, and it's kind of funny because you can tell that the engine sound does not match that make and model, or somebody's going through 12 gears. It's like, who's in charge at that point?
Well, it's funny, like on most films, after we finish, I'll generally ride through the stunt sequences with sound, right? So I'll get mic'd up, we'll mic the bike, I'll write everything on tape, stick it to the tank, and I'll run through all the sequences. That's where, after that, where it can go bad. Most of the time, everybody gets it right. But then there's some where you just, and that's just, a lot of times in a film, if there isn't somebody who is really on top of that part, right? Because a film's made by a lot of different departments, right? And you can look at the process and say, like, the wardrobe girl is freaking out because the button's different on that jacket and nobody will ever see it. Not the point. She should be. Her job is to make sure that every single thing is exactly as it's supposed to be. Same with me, same with stunts, same with everybody. That's why, the whole process works. So if there's not somebody that's there to tell a sound guy, then that's when those problems happen, because you might get lucky. You might have a sound. I've worked with sound guys that are really good riders, and we get it nailed perfect every time. Sometimes it just doesn't happen, and it's always funny when you have a guy riding his bagger Harley through the desert, and there's like some two-stroke sound behind it.
Exactly.
and like a lot of times too, you lose control at that point, and it's frustrating. And there's so many different elements involved that can push it away from being correct. But when it works, right, you don't notice it. And that's sort of the funny part about what you do. If you do everything perfect, then nothing you do should look overly impressive.
Yep.
That's how we do. Like, if we do a prototype for a bike and we get it on set, and they're like, you guys spent 2 months doing this? Doesn't look like you did anything. Looks like it's out of the showroom. And we're like, yes, we did it good.
Nice.
That's great. And you mentioned, while you were talking about this last part, you touched on some of the amazing writers that you've worked with on set. And what we want to know is, out of the celebrities or movie stars that you've worked with who have ridden some of the bikes, are some of them great riders? How many of them come in with motorcycling experience versus are there actors that you end up having to train?
I'd say like maybe half of the actors or actresses you get have some experience, a little bit. You know, there's a small portion of talent that we work with that are really good riders. You know, everybody always asks me about Tom Cruise. Tom can ride a motorcycle really well. He's a really good rider, and he can drive a car. You know, everybody's like, oh, Tom Cruise doing stunts. Would make a great stuntman. He really would. That makes my job easier and harder at the same time, right? It makes it easier for us because we can talk to an actor like that and go, right, tell us what you want. And they know what they want. Other times, somebody has a little bit of experience, we have to work with them. But, you know, I'd say very rarely do we get somebody that has zero experience. Now, when Rooney Mara got cast in Dragon Tattoo, they sent her to me the day she got cast, and because she had never been on a motorcycle before, and a big part of that character is her riding her bike around. So, you know, she shows up, and I'm like, right, I've never even sat on a bike. I'm like, okay. So I threw on the back of, I had a ton, we're in the middle building all these bikes, we're busy, we're doing a movie, we're doing another thing. I have all these errands to run, so I'm like, okay, get on the back. So I ride around and do everything I have to do with Rooney on the back, so she could kind of start feeling what the motion was and what was happening. And then I have a pretty good secret system to train actors and actresses, which I'm not telling you because it's my secret.
Bummer.
But after the next day, we started Rooney riding, and I'd say within 3 days she could do everything she needed to do on camera. Now, the reason she was so successful in that is she approached it as part of her acting. She was also learning to ride a skateboard. She was learning how to kickbox. A lot of things. She's a good actress. This was another piece of acting. Had she approached it as a scary motorcycle, it might not have been as successful, you know? And she did great. And, you know, we continued to train throughout the film, and, you know, but the second part of that question is, you know, what happens afterwards? Some of these actors and actresses that we train to ride like it and continue on and move on and call like a year later and go, hey, I want to get a new bike, and, you know, and they become into it. Some of them, it was just another piece of acting, you know. You know, it's easy for us, and we probably do it too often to like make fun of the actors and like, oh, but you know what? It's a hard job. It really is. I don't think people, we sort of on the outside of the film world as fans or as movie viewers get to see, you know, the shiny part, but it actually is a tough job as far as, you know, the responsibility that these guys have for so many different things going on, and everybody needs a piece of them. And there's so many, you know, different sort of facets of that. So if you have a really good actor, they're going to be fine. If you have somebody that is a really bad rider and is very sort of confident, that's where it goes bad for us. I'd much rather have somebody approaching it new than somebody that thinks they know how to ride good. But not, you know, most of the time we don't put the talent in situations that are dangerous like that. That's what stuntmen are for. That's why we have doubles, is that we can let them concentrate on their thing, and we're there to pick up the slack on the stuff where it might not necessarily require the actor.
That really is impressive, because learning to ride is not easy. So some people, it may just come naturally to them, but I know for myself and the other Motor Tribe ladies as well, it's something that takes a lot of time. So for an actor to come on board and learn how to ride in such a short period of time, on top of having to learn lines and blocking and like Rooney Mara, all the other skills that she has to learn, it's extremely impressive.
Yeah, I mean, like with Rooney, we were just part, I was a 2-hour block of a 12-hour day. You know what I mean? So she had some stuff going on. We did this film years ago, this Tarantino produced thing where they just wanted to make like a bad 60s biker movie, right? That was the point. And we did this movie, Hell Ride, and it was so much fun to make. We had Dennis Hopper in it, and Vinnie Jones, and Michael Madsen. It was this like over-the-top biker movie. But one of our leads in the film was an actor named Eric Balfour. And Eric's character in the movie is riding a 40s Indian bobber, right? So we put together these Indian, late 40s Indian chief bobbers, and they had jockey shifts behind the seats and left-hand throttles and foot clutches. Eric had never ridden a motorcycle before. And we taught Eric how to ride a bike. That's it. He rode around on that bike. Got it. But I remember after we'd been shooting maybe a week or two, he comes in on Monday morning. He's like, I went to my friend's house this week and he has this Ducati. And I got on it like, I didn't know what to do. Like, I thought it, and we were laughing like, Eric only knows how to ride a foot clutch Indian. Like, he got on a modern bike and like didn't know what was going on. So that kind of stuff's pretty funny.
That's funny. I'm curious, you mentioned that, like, for instance, Tom Cruise knows how to ride a bike and maybe does some of his stunts. Is it hard? I mean, I assume that you probably want a double in some of the sequences or in some of the scenes because they are dangerous. You don't want him to push his limits and have an accident. Yeah. So is that hard?
Yeah, it's a very legitimate thing that happens. But I think a lot of times people don't understand is when we're shooting all the action sequences, we're doing like a giant car chase with a bike and stuff. We could be in a different country than the main actor. Like we'll generally shoot that stuff on a second unit, which is called a second unit, and we'll go off. We have a different director. We have a different stunt coordinator, and we go make our own little movie off to the side. And we do that without talent, because especially in a big action film, if we had to do that stuff with everybody there all the time, it would take 2 years to make the movie. And this way, most movies are broken up into main units and second units. Not all, some directors really like working with one unit throughout the course of things, and you can pull that off with some scripts. I've actually done quite a few films recently where we just ran one unit, which is uncommon for what I do. Like The Matrix has such huge action sequences, and they're so good. You would expect a film like that to run a second unit, but we did not. We ran that as one unit. And which was kind of, it's fun. It's a cool way to work. It doesn't apply to a lot of stuff. You just can't do it. It's just not practical. But when it happens, it's kind of cool. We did a Paul Thomas Anderson film, I guess about a year ago, and we shot that as one unit as well. But his films are kind of small and intimate, and that I like that as well. So it's a whole different way of shooting. Like we could shoot. Remember, we were doing one of the Captain Americas, or maybe it was one of the Avengers, where we were shooting second unit in one country and main unit was on a different continent. So there really is, and you could have your friend that's on the job who's on main unit, and you go off and you do the movie for 8 months and you didn't see him once.
That's funny. So The Matrix, that was Keanu Reeves. Did he do a lot of the writing sequences as well?
Nope, can't talk about that one.
Got
Not
it.
out yet.
Not a problem.
He's a great writer, though. I will
Yes.
tell you that. And you know, that's asking about talent that can ride good and that is into it. He's, you know, at the top of that list. He's up there. You know, aside from just being, you know, like a good solid guy, he has a really deep love of motorcycles, you know, and not as sort of a part of a prop almost for him to be the kind of guy. Like it's not that. It's just something that's part of him, like you, like me, you know, like all of us that are interested in this stuff. It's just kind of sort of a part of your soul. It's who you are. This is another extension, and that's we have a lot of actors we work with that are like that, you know, and that makes it fun.
That's
Yeah, I bet it does.
You know, for me, for my job, you know, you can have an actor that's got, you know, he's on 15-hour days and it's chaos and all this stuff's going on. But then like we come on to set with the bikes and it's like, oh, good, the bike guys are here. Something that we like that's fun, you know. So we generally have a, you know, it's not like a guy coming to do 2 hours of prosthetic makeup on you. It's like the guys showing up with the bikes you can go ride around for a little bit.
It's a fun job.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of stunts, do you have a favorite stunt sequence that you've either been in yourself, because you do stunts, or one that you've directed?
Okay, so my favorite sequence we did, which I did neither of that. I did not. This was early on too when I was starting it. There's a stunt coordinator, a British stunt coordinator that spends a lot of time in the United States as well, named Gary Powell. And Gary coordinated the second unit on Crystal Skull. And we had a stuntman on there named Lee Morrison. So we do a bike chase. We shot that entire thing at Yale University, right? So we're riding bikes through the library, Yale. We're riding across the grass. You know, nobody's going to get to do that ever again. You know, like you have a day where you're at work and you're going 70 miles an hour with no helmet through a street while the cops are holding traffic and giving you the bye-bye, you know, and then you go off into the grass and ride across the field at Yale. And then, you know, but during that sequence, it was a biggie. We shot that for probably a month every day of that chase scene.
Wow.
But we did it, you know, it was so solid and good, that scene. And like Lee did one part of he does a lay down in the library and he comes in, lays the bike down, slides it. It had to have been a good like 30 yards under a table. So he's got about a foot on each side of the bike and maybe about 6 inches ahead of the table. So he has to shoot the bike on a slide through that each time. And, you know, he nailed that. That was a really fun sequence to do. What else was fun?
You mentioned each time. How many times did he have to do that trick?
He probably did it 5 times, I'd say. And then, well, the bad part about that was on the last take, kind of goes a little funky. There's one of our extras kind of got in the way and Lee had to shoulder him out of the way and does his lay down. It's kind of jerky and jumpy and they've been smooth. So we call cut when it's over and, you know, Lee gets up and he looks over at us and he's like, find my finger. And like scurries off. We're like, oh no. So then we're like, top of his finger is off. So we're like, but, you know, it part of it grew back. He was all right. He was working a couple days later. You know, like that's the problem with doing so many takes. You know, perfect, find my finger. You know, Lee's one of the best in the business. In fact, Lee just got done stunt coordinating the new Bond film. He's he's been one of the most solid stuntmen in the UK and in the business for quite a long time. And he's moving that into coordinating shows, and he's a really good coordinator. And some guys don't want to do that. Some guys try to do it and aren't that good at it. Some are great. Lee's really good at it. So it's interesting to see that too, you know, because you just can't help it. You spend so many years on the sets of these gigantic films watching the best guys in the film industry. You know, you pick things up. You've just, you know, your career has been going to the best film school on the planet, you know, because you're there watching these guys. You know, like when you watch how each of these directors work, you know, and the differences and who their mannerisms and what they're seeing, you know, and if you paid attention to that, it's fascinating. I like to watch that sort of that creativity and how each one has their own process. You know, some are precise, some it's just mayhem, but you know the end result's going to be good. You know, it's really cool. It's one of the things I love about doing this. Each job is completely different. You know how to do things because you've done things similar before, but you've never done the same thing before. So it's like having a new career for 9 months and then you go into your next new career.
Do you get a lot of latitude on the stunts? For instance, does the producer say, I want this exact stunt done? Or can you come on set and say, I think this would be neat for this movie?
Well, you know, there's generally, you'll start out with a plan, right? And adapt it as it goes. So rarely is there something that if it doesn't look like it's working in rehearsals or it doesn't feel right, has to be in no matter what. You know, because it is a creative process like anything else. You know, if dialogue isn't working, it gets adapted. So we kind of go with it. Now, a good stunt coordinator and a good second unit director have it mapped out pretty close in the beginning. But, you know, we spend weeks rehearsing these things. And, you know, on the day when you're there filming and you've got 3 cars, you know, on ramps that are flipping and you've got explosions going on and 100 extras running around and chaos, like it needs to be precise. Everybody needs to know exactly what they're doing. And that's when you work all that stuff out beforehand, you know, because a lot of times it doesn't work, you know, and a lot of times as you start rehearsing, you realize that it can grow, it can be bigger. And that's what happens more often than not, is a small little scene will develop into a big thing. That's what I like, because that means more work and more fun.
Well, I'm sure, especially if you're on the set and you're like, oh, it could be this, and you give ideas to it.
Yeah, well, then we all talk about it. The writer will come up with something. He knows his perspective. I'm there watching like, oh, you know what we could do. The second unit director or the main unit director is like, oh, I know, you know, like everybody has a thing, and that's how films get made. You know, it's pretty uncommon to come across what you'd think of like the my way, like it's just not that common. Most directors I've worked with and like everybody throughout the line, the people that are the most successful I've found are the ones that hire creativity and listen to it. You know, there's no sense in, you know, you're doing a good job when you have the best people and you let them do their thing, you know, and that's when the results, as far as I've seen and my experiences, when you let the best guys really go for it, it's you get great results. You know, what's happening in stunts and films right now is, you know, it's amazing that what is able to happen with the development of safer ways to do things, with having the ability at the back end of visual effects, which can be you know, we'll talk about that later, the visual effects. But, you know, there's just, everybody's getting so good. It's like looking at motocross riders. Look at GP riders. Look at skateboarders. Everybody's so goddamn cool. Like 20 years ago, you'd be like, what? A backflip 100 feet in the air? Just I think as terrain and equipment advances, so does the abilities of everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see that across the board in every sport and everything that people do creatively.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it really is good, and it's exciting, and it's cool to be a part of it. And like my part in this stuff is small. Like a film's made up of a ton of small little things going down. Like what goes on, it's pretty. There isn't one job, I don't think, in the making of a feature film that you couldn't focus on from sort of this perspective and just be like, you do what? And it becomes fascinating. Like everybody's got their own little part to play, and you won't have the result that you get without everybody's little contribution. And actually, people don't think in different departments their contribution is that strong or that important, but I kind of think it is. Like, everybody, it's this whole house of cards. It's that's what I like about it. There's one guy calling the shot. You got the boss, but if he's a good boss, he has 20 people, each head in their own little section, and those guys are in charge of that, and that's when it works.
Makes sense. So you mentioned earlier that you fabricate a lot of the motorcycles that you guys film. Just like, for example, the Honda CRF that was in Oblivion. You guys totally changed that bike. It looks nothing like the production bike. Do you have a build that you created in your own vision that you love? Like, do you have your favorite build?
I really love the Oblivion bike.
Yeah?
Yeah. No, it's one of my favorites we ever did. It was like the absolute best case scenario for us on a job. The prop master hired me on that job. It's this guy called Doug Harlocker, and he's one of the top prop masters in the business. He's good. He's sharp, and he's a good motorcyclist. He rides bikes. We're doing this film. He calls me, and I get sent over the drawings, sort of the spec drawings of what they're looking at in production design. I'm like, whoa, this is cool. And then we start reading the script. We start looking at what we're going to have to do. We're going to shoot all the bike stuff in Iceland. The terrain's going to be funky. Okay. Then we go look at the bubble ship, right? This company called Wild Factory builds a lot of really crazy high-end movie props and works with auto industry a lot. I go to a meeting up at Wild Factory and I look at the bubble ship because they're starting to build the bubble ship. I'm like, whoa. So I get my car in the way home. I call the workshop. I was like, all right, we're next level in this one. We've got to be on the game. And the way why everything was so good in that film is I was told, here's what we want. We want it to be made as good as it can possibly be made. I want it, they gave me the resources to do it as good as we possibly could. They gave me, we had this 3D modeler, Todd Charnielski, who's an art director. He does small movies nobody's ever heard of, like Avatar, and he's good. He's done on Star Trek. Like, Todd's got the eye. Todd knows nothing about motorcycles, nor is he interested. But he is a designer, and he's a good designer, and he listens and knows. And he'd come work at our shop, and we'd, rip the bike down, and we'd scan it, and Todd would model everything, and we'd figure out what was going to work and what wasn't. We had BST in South Africa make us wheels. So I had the budget and the thumbs up to, have custom made carbon fiber wheels done for these bikes. One of our big tricks on that bike was it was meant to be electric, right? There's no way I was going to go to the top of Iceland with electric bikes. No way. But it just wasn't there yet. So, like, okay, we take that drawing and we figure out what we can fit it over, right? So let's use a 450X CRF. Why the X? Because we know we're going to have body panels and won't be able to kickstart it. We have to get rid of the kickstart, so we need electric. We can't use fuel tank because we don't have any room, so we have to make, aluminum fuel cells that we can fit in and hide those. Suspension stuff, we work all that out normal, make subframes, all that kind of stuff. And now, while we're doing that, Todd is 3D modeling everything in the bodywork to fit together, to work together, to be seamless as you do a car prototype. Then we have another company that's right down the street from me who we use for making those body parts. So all the models go there. Everything gets CNC cut out of high density foam, so we have bucks to test it and make sure it looks right. Use those then to make the molds. Now I generally make our body work out of fiberglass, which areas are why don't you just injection mold it? Why don't you 3D print it? I use fiberglass because you can fix it quick on the spot. You know what I mean? If I bash into a tree with sort of SLS printed parts, they disintegrate.
Yep.
You go into a tree and break a body panel in half, you can Bondo it, stick it back together, on the quick. And that's what's the most important for us, is to be able to react quick and get it back in action. So you have all this stuff going on. We're in the back here, the workshop, all the guys, and, we're fighting and ain't gonna work. We're trying all this different stuff because we don't have any time. And we're running through exhaust. Like, how are we going to do this exhaust? How are we going to hide it? We don't want it to have to be sticking out the side and removed in visual effects.
Mm-hmm.
So we end up using sort of hot rod car parts. We use super trap and end caps to build an exhaust that tucks underneath. And we don't know what we're going to get into as far as sort of atmospheric and altitude in Iceland.
Mm-hmm.
We have an exhaust setup that we can put discs on it to tune it once we get there. And, it's like, that's the kind of stuff that's fun to figure out. Now that bike, we have maybe a pint of fuel, right? But we're not going on long rides. We're doing a scene. So that was always a worry, and there's no way to check it. So like figuring it out on our own, like time-wise, how much time we have, and, and that's another thing we have to think of, like, how quickly can we get to the fuel?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're making all the fake body work and stuff, all that stuff has to come into play. Sure, it can look cool, but can we pull it off in 2 minutes and put it back on? So that's all the stuff. That's why that job was so fun, because we were given the team and the resources to make it as great as we possibly could. And there isn't a whole lot I'd do different to that bike, and we made there's a scene in the film where Tom pulls it out with a bubble ship and puts it together because it's in a little suitcase. So we made all that. We made that happen. We built another one that was pieces that we could do all that stuff practically. So it didn't have to
look cool.
Yeah, so it didn't have to look like a weird visual effects thing. Like
Yeah.
that was happening. When Tom pulls that seat out, he's pulling the seat out and it's locking. When he goes with the handlebars and the lights came on, we had a whole sort of pivot system in there with a trigger switch. So when those lights come on, and that's the kind of stuff I love.
That's awesome.
That's so cool. And actually, that was something I was curious about, because you mentioned some of these bikes, like the one you discussed, they're really one of a kind in a lot of ways. And then some of the bikes you have are prototypes, but it's always possible that a bike could get crashed, and maybe it's an accident, or maybe it's actually meant to be crashed in the film. And so how do you deal with that, with having multiples of the bikes?
We do. Like, we'll generally, if we go into a big feature with, I'll build 9 or 10 of the same bike. I'll have them numbered, and each one will be set up. Like if we have a big nose wheelie scene, right? We'll set the front end of that bike up a little bit different. So that, boom, number 3 is nose wheelie bike. That's stuck on the board in the truck, so we remember which bike's for the nose wheelie. We do a lot of crashes, right? So we'll build crash cages for bikes so we can get multiple takes out of them so you can't see them, and so we don't, injure our rider. So we'll have bikes set up for the crash. Like we might have a scene where somebody's got to fight while they're riding. That'll be our left-hand throttle bike. We'll set up a left-hand throttle so they can fight right-handed while they're riding. You got to do all that kind of stuff. And then what I generally do, so hopefully none of the producers are listening or watching, but say if we have 10 bikes, right? I will go to set and go, right, we've got 8 bikes. And we keep a couple spares in case something goes bad, which it generally does. But sometimes we have 3 that we know we're going to blow up. Just we crash bikes. A lot of the companies, that's something that we work through in the beginning. How many are we going to need? Okay, you're giving us 10 bikes. You'll probably get 6 back, 7 if we're lucky. You don't want to give anybody that surprise. Hey, remember your prototype? Yeah. It does happen. Stuff gets messed up that isn't supposed to. But, most of the guys I work with have respect for the machines. Like a good stuntman respects the machine. He respects the car he's in. He respects the horse he's riding or the motorcycle he's riding, because that's your tool for the job. So we try and take care of the stuff. Our industry, my job in particular, has a reputation of like just destroying vehicles and bikes. But it's what happens in working. We ride motorcycles differently than the general public for what we're doing, and stuff happens.
That's interesting. And so the bikes, we talk about having sometimes 10 bikes on set.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure after the filming is done, so now you've got these bikes that have made appearances in films. So what happens to those bikes? Are people able to buy them?
Rarely. It depends on the company you're working with too. So Free Guy, right? Free Guy was a job we did with Ducati, and we're working with the prototype and stuff. Ducati supplies us what we need for the film. Our bikes we're going to test and rehearse with, the hero bikes. We go pick them up in Mountain View. We return them afterwards. Sometimes on a film, I have to go out and buy all the bikes before we start. So I'll go buy all the bikes for the studio, and then they become property of the studio. So we finish filming, they become an asset to the film, and they generally will go into storage. Occasionally, years later, the opportunity will come up for somebody like me to buy them. I can buy them, but I'm also under contract that I cannot turn around and sell them as a film prop. I can't go get all the Dragon Tattoos bikes from Sony and then stick them on eBay as Dragon Tattoo bikes, But some bikes from a show become handy, like especially ones that aren't particularly obviously to a film. Sometimes we'll buy 5 KTMs for a scene where they're just generic bikes. And it's great to get stuff like that back because you can use them on other jobs.
Oh, nice.
There's bikes in my shop that have done like 20 different shows. I have a lot of bikes in this shop, and these are bikes that work in the film industry. Like somebody calls me and go, we need a 60s Triumph. okay, here's 5 to choose from. And out of those 5 60s Triumphs, most of them have different outfits, so they become 10 60s Triumphs. And, but you end up buying a lot of weird bikes. And like what I do is, well, I'll just buy it for the show and sell it afterwards, but I never do. So they just keep piling up in the shop. And then you look in the corner and you get like the registration bill, like, which one's that? Wait. And then you're like, do we have a 73 Harley here? And then you have to go look, oh, that one. Yeah.
So are they all registered? Like they're actually street legal? Or-
Sometimes, like it depends what they're for, They all start out that way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I figured they were just props, so not registered. Like I have track bikes that aren't registered because
but
they never see the street.
that start has a EPA file and a VIN number, and so everything, especially for us, has to be. We go ship international. We need certificates of origin. We need titles.
That makes sense.
We have to keep all that stuff in order. So I have this huge filing cabinet. And that, like, you go through that, all these bikes are on, what you do, I don't know how they do it where you're at, but like we can put it as a non-operated vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
We're not paying like a full registration, but it's a lot of stuff to keep track of.
Yeah.
Like I'm really bad at that because I buy these bikes and I plan to sell them afterwards, and I never do.
Selling bikes is hard.
I hate it. I'm not into it.
I have one I need to put on sale right now, and I'm dreading the hell out of it. It's almost easier to let it rot in the garage and deal with people.
Yeah, it's not my thing. I don't like it. And my kids ride, so they're always like, like, hey, what about that bike from, I saw that in there. Can I ride it? Like my 17-year-old just took over a bike that Kawasaki had given us for a film, and and so like my kids got it easy. I think motorcycles grow on trees. And,
nice.
And my oldest is, he's just starting work as a stuntman, so he's doing shows, and so it's it's cool. They had a interesting childhood where this kind of stuff seems commonplace.
Wow, that's got to be amazing. I can't even imagine that lifestyle.
But my 17-year-old used to, I used to take him to preschool on my Vincent, right? So he'd go to preschool, and then somebody's like, "Oh, your dad rode you on a motorcycle," and he'd be like, "My dad rode me on a Vincent." Yeah. But he rides his bike to senior year of high school every day. And I mean, we live out here, and it's what brought me here from the East Coast is growing up in the snow, and I grew up skateboarding and with motorcycles, and I wanted to be. I figured I'd come out to California, and it was just full of like people riding motorcycles around and surfing, and it kind of is, but not, but I was able to find my version of that sort of fantasy growing up of coming out here and doing this kind of stuff. Would have never thought I was doing this. Like I said, it's you don't like show up to Hollywood and call the union and say, I want to be a motorcycle guy. Like the sort of motorcycle coordinator job I have is really a category that it didn't really exist before I did it. It just, in the progression of filming, there used to not be picture car coordinators, right? And now that's a very important job on a film. As each little piece gets more specialized, these new jobs develop. There used to not be visual effects guys.
Right. That's true. So as you've been working on these films, is there any cool behind the scenes secret or something that maybe not even a secret, but something that us viewers aren't aware of that you guys have learned through your years of working in the industry that would be a really cool, fun fact for us to discover that we don't know about?
Well, I mean, with the vehicle stuff, okay, so you watch a giant car chase and cars blown up and flipping through the air and bikes shooting through the middle of them, you know, but then there's like some sort of space thing flying in, and, you know, so I think the first people's first line of thoughts nowadays are that all this stuff's done sort of computer generated.
Mhm.
The fact is, we shoot probably 90% of the chaos you see is done practically. It's done. And what will happen a lot of times is visual effects comes in afterwards, and they can take this sequence that you spent months shooting and doing it for real, and when all the other elements come into it, it almost doesn't look believable. And that happens quite a bit. And it's sort of, you know, it's part of the game, but you're like, somebody will look at the jump in Venom, right? So that's a good example. So Venom doing his thing, huge, massive jump, right? And there's some sort of Venom-y thing comes in tentacles, and right. What you don't know is in Russian Hill in San Francisco, there's a very famous. It's called the Bullet Hill. It's where Steve McQueen did the big Mustang jump and Bullet, massive hill. We built a ramp on the top of the hill, and Robbie Madison came down in the rain at night, going about 50 miles an hour, and did about 100-foot jump off that.
In the rain.
That jump was real, and it was massive.
Wow. How did he land?
He landed at the end of the block. But you wouldn't watch that particular scene and know that, right? Because there's so much other elements going on to the film that are more important than Robbie Madison doing his jump, right? It's just part of what's happening there. It transforms. But it's really common, and a lot of people I talk to don't understand. Like, wait, you guys really did that? Like, yeah, that's what we do. That's why we were gone for 2 months rehearsing that and those jumps. And you know, Venom had a really great chase scene. We shot the bulk of that in Atlanta. We finished it off in San Francisco, and we had 3 different riders on that film, all like really, really specialized guys, right? We had one of your locals, Joe Dryden, Joe Vertical, everybody calls him. Joe can do a nose wheelie for like 6 miles while he's talking on the phone and drinking a coffee. You know, we had Joe out doing his thing. We had a guy named Jimmy Roberts, who's probably one of the most working motorcycle stuntmen in the business. He's, you know, been doing it forever. He's done a lot of films with me, and he's a great rider. Jimmy doing his part. We had Robbie come in for that jump while we film other stuff we can shoot, and that's Robbie's specialty. Robbie's out of his mind, so he does that kind of stuff. So that's another thing that people might not understand. We really have specialized guys for each thing. Now, a good solid stuntman is good at everything, but you do, you know, have guys that are particularly good at one thing.
Sure.
You know?
Very cool.
Yeah, it's like you wouldn't want to hire me to do the cars for a film. They would be crap. I wouldn't know what to do. Which means you don't necessarily can't bring in a pro motocross rider to do some of the stuff we do, you know. So, but I think that's, if to answer your question, I think most people don't understand that even the stuff that looks fake, we probably did it for real.
That's awesome. That was something I wasn't really aware of either. I was recently watching some documentary on a movie, and there was a stunt that I'd seen, and I was convinced. I thought that was completely CG, and I had no idea. They filmed everything in that entire sequence, and it blew my mind. With that, I have so much more respect for filmmakers and guys like you. Like, I had no idea.
Well, I mean, we'll come out of some sequences with a rider and just be like, oh my God, I can't believe he did that. And we've seen some serious stuff, you know. We've seen some nasty crashes too.
Sure.
You know, it's part of one of the, you know, stressful parts of my job and the guys in the shop is we're putting together this stuff where if we're not on our game and we don't pay attention, I might have to be at one of my friend's house telling his wife, I'm sorry I killed him. Like it's what we do is dangerous. And,
Right.
we have to keep that in our minds at all time. Like, these are our friends. These are, we're out here, we're doing this for a living. It's fun and stuff. But at the same time, like, it's dangerous stuff. So it's important, the stunt world is a lot more safety conscious than most people understand.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not the land of crash test dummies and go for it and jump down the stairs. Like, stuff's really thought out, and that's why it's evolving. Like, the reason you see stunts getting better is because people are safer, and having that safety element is allowing everything to just keep growing and becoming cooler, I think. You would think it would be the opposite, that you'd get something better if, like, fuck it, I'm going over the falls in the barrel. But you actually get better results with everything planned out,
No, that makes sense.
a scientific approach to it instead of the, hold my beer approach.
Yep, makes sense.
Yeah, and although there is a serious aspect to the riding to ensure no one gets hurt, I'm sure there's also the times when maybe it's hard to keep some of the crew or actors off the bikes. And so are there any elements or fun that people have or shenanigans on the side?
Constantly. Yeah. Well, and some of the guys too, like, we'll have 5 riders on a job, right? And everybody's got to set their bike up the same way. And some guys are weird. Nobody can ride my bike. So what we'll do, we have fun with that. Like, there's lots of, like, somebody will get naked and get on somebody's bike, and I'll take pictures and send them to you. Like, yeah, we're working on your bike right now. That kind of stuff. And yeah, it's we do have fun. I mean, and bikes getting stolen, that happens.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody about that not too long ago. Yanush, who is Steven Spielberg's DP, would steal our bikes occasionally on Indiana Jones, which was it was funny because he's a very funny guy. And sometimes you get stuff like you're working and you hear a bike fire up and you're just like, oh God, who would do that? But then you like go over to yell at somebody and it's the boss, director. You're just like, yeah. Or you'll have Yanush ride by you, giving you the finger, and then he goes parks the bike somewhere, and you got to go find it.
Oh.
Like one of the guys that used to work for me, Eric Orr, he was one of my main techs for a long time. Him and Jimmy Roberts would always butt heads. Those two would always be going at it. And I remember we were shooting in a tunnel in Berlin one time. It was like a half mile, this tunnel. And so we're coming to the end of the day, and we've been in this tunnel for 10 or 12 hours. So when we'd finish, what we were shooting, the bikes would end up at this end of the tunnel. The riders would ride them back, and we'd stash them where we had them. So we finished one day, and Jimmy and Eric have been like arguing all day. And so they call cut, and we're done, and we're waiting for the bikes to get by. And Jimmy comes by in a van and like gives Eric the finger, and Eric has to walk a half mile up the tunnel and go get the bike. So we'll do stuff like that. But what I always wanted to do, like sometimes we'll have actors that we just go fire the bike up while we're shooting, and just guys that are a pain in the ass. Doesn't happen too often, but what we always want to do is just put a remote kill switch on the bike. And then walk over and start, oh, it's fine. And then like when they take off, we could kill it. And then like get on it, ride it around. I don't know, it's fine. And like that's kind of stuff we always want to do, but haven't.
Oh, you got to do that. I want to see this happen.
No, we have a lot of fun. I mean, I just came off a job, not a non-motorcycle job that I got back from coordinated skateboard scene, and we had like my son and a bunch of his friends, all these kids just skateboarding for a full day. you know, and that was fun. That was like our job for the day. And, you know, and there's days like, you know, like on Oblivion, there was a time where we had to ride in, we were doing this big helicopter shot, and we couldn't have tracks. So we couldn't get to the top of this mountain, or else the helicopter would see all our tire tracks coming in. So we had to come in from the back. So Tom and Jimmy Roberts and me and Icelandic local that was sort of a guide where we were shooting, and we all rode up through the sand, like, you know, and it's 3 a.m. and we're on top of this volcano in Iceland, and it's the sun's sitting there, and we're looking around, you know, and we're on parts of Iceland where people aren't allowed to go, like these restricted areas. And I remember we're all standing there looking around, and I was like, we're at work right now. And we all kind of looked at each other like, yeah, well played, you know? And Tom and like, I think we all hit it at that exact time. Like, man, we're pretty lucky. We're at work right now, you know?
Epic
Like,
shit.
you get to do that kind of stuff. And my job allows for quite a few of those moments where we do something like that that's so much fun, and it's exciting. You know, you make like on Jumanji, there's one scene in the movie where all the bike guys come off this hill, right? So what you don't see is we had freestyle ramps on the top of this mountain we made, and we just sent, like, I don't know, go fast. We don't know what's going to happen. We had guys in sidecars hitting 40-foot jump, you know, and it was a bit nerve-wracking the first one. Then boom, we do it, and it's perfect. And like that feeling of everybody, like afterwards, like it's so good. That's why you do it, you know. And everybody's like, it's not just like the writers or me or like on a film set when, you know, that happens. Like, it's exciting. You feel it. There's an energy to it, you know. And that's one of the things I'm really fortunate about, that I get to do this for a living. And sometimes it sucks, but even when it's at its worst, you know, like I'll have to like sit in my truck with the mirror and go like, shut up, you know, like even at its worst, it's pretty good.
Well, it seems pretty unbelievable. And, you know, things are always changing because you're going to movie. So even if it does suck, you're on to a new project at some point in the future. I do want to ask you what's next, but I don't know how much you can talk about what's next.
I don't know. I just finished a job. And it was one of those jobs where when I finished, I was like, I'm done. I am sick of the film industry. That was awful. Right. But the next one will be great. So I don't know what's next. I haven't looked for our next film yet. There's a couple things popping around. I can't really go out and look for a job. You know, it's this, you know, the sort of film industry in my little world, like feature films, motorcycle, it's a small little circle. Mm-hmm. So it's a phone call. You know, I get a call, hey, we got this going. It's got a bike scene. What are you doing? I'm in. You know, that's it. You know, we're looking at a couple of really cool things that are firing up in the UK. And we've done some lately, we've been working around LA, which hasn't happened in a long time. So that's been fun. And then weird stuff shows its face. Like you get a call like, hey, you want to come out and help do a skateboard scene on a TV show? I'm like, absolutely. You know, that's sort of my background. Where I come from is skateboard land. And, you know, I've been riding motorcycles since 8 years old, but also been, you know, riding skateboards since then. And I actually get hurt more skateboarding than I do crashing motorcycles. So.
Why is that? Is because motorcycles maybe have gear on versus skateboarding, or you just...
skateboarding's brutal. You know?
Yeah, you're mentioning this.
Right. 3 weeks ago, they're putting 9 screws and a plate in my ankle. You know, it's you know, we get hurt riding motorcycles too, but like all this stuff is, you know, I've been lucky enough and fortunate enough to be able to sort of have my passions become my career. You know, I think it's something that a lot of people chase, and it's really hard to pull off. It's you know, it's been difficult, but it's, even when it's, like I was saying, even when it's bad, like I still am like, I can't believe I'm getting paid for this. You know, like it's you know, it's really, it's a good thing. It's a weird business, and it's not for everybody. I can't. It's hard for me to find people to work for me, because when we go, like there's nothing else going on in your life. That's it. You're doing this job. You know, I've missed my kids growing up. Like there'd be times where I'm gone 9 months out of the year, 10 months. You know, and that's sort of one of the bad parts of this job. But you know, it's pretty fortunate. Like I really try and remember how lucky I am to do this stuff. I like riding motorcycles. Get to do it at work. You know, I got to a point a few years ago where I realized that I was just like never riding a bike unless I was working, and couldn't care less. I'd hear a bike ride past my house and be like, oh God, you know. And then my kids started wanting to ride a bunch. Boom, back in, you know. And all of a sudden, that's a whole different way of approaching it and fun. And then doing different stuff with them. Like I went and rode trials a little bit ago. I've never ridden trials. So me and my youngest kid are like, let's go to trial school for the day. And we went. Oh my God, did I suck. It was great. Like, you know, I told the guy, I'm like, oh, no idea. Never been on a trials bike. And I'm thinking like, I'm going to kill it. This is going to be easy. It wasn't easy at all. It was insanely hard. I embarrassed myself all day, nonstop. And it was great. You know, like you remember that. Like all of a sudden I was an absolute, you know, beginning rider. And you realize at that point how exciting it is. You know, and it's fun. You know, and like I crashed the dude who owns the school's bike in front of him. You know, and they're like, I'm supposed to be good at this. And you know, so it was a super humbling day, but it was, you know, that kind of stuff. Like me and some of the stunt guys that I work with, we saw on Instagram some dude build a wheelie rig, and he's doing a wheelie school, and I'm like, oh, we're in. So we're all going to go to the dude's wheelie school because it'll be fun, you know. And we called him and said like, no, none of us know how to ride. But that's not how we want to come in. We want you to do your system on us as if we don't know how to ride. You know, and I think that's another thing that's fun, is like trying this new kind of stuff, and you know, I don't know, approaching it like all these guys that are good. You know, these are guys that have been riding professionally for 30 years, still train all nonstop. You know, but you know, we're all in that fortunate position that we've taken our hobby and made it a career.
Yeah. That's amazing. Not many people can say that. And I for sure can relate to the fact of, you know, feeling like I know how to ride and then going to some sort of training school and realizing that I know nothing. So I appreciate that.
It was really funny, you know, because, you know, I'm like, I thought I'd be better than I was. Like, I knew I wasn't going to be great, but I thought I'd like get it. Oh no, I was awful. Like it was bad. and like, the funny thing was it almost made me have more fun than if I would have been good right away.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know why, but it was a good experience, because actually me and my kid came in at the same level. You know, and I asked him, I'm like, what do you think? Do we ride trials now? And he's like, boring, too slow. I'm like, but Hattie said like, yeah, we're in. I'm like, cool, let's go buy trials bikes. We're riding trials now. And we'd learn together, you know?
Yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah. Not easy, the old trials. If you get a chance to go do it, do it. It's
good to know.
Yeah, it looks intense.
Because it doesn't look like it'll be that hard. I mean, now it does, when guys are climbing trees and doing backflips and crap, but just the simplest stuff, where doing a slow speed 90-degree turn, That's not easy.
Nope.
Well, I don't want to keep you too long. We've already had you over an hour. So really appreciate your time. Is there anything else you want to share with us that maybe we haven't covered?
No, just
How many weeks do you have now?
my plan here was to talk a lot and give you a lot to work with.
Yeah, no, really appreciate it. It was fascinating. I know the ladies, when I told them that you were down to do this, they got really excited. So,
well, it's a weird thing what I do, like the job, and I think it's fairly interesting because you don't know how this goes down. You know, like how does this happen? How do you do this for a living? Like it's generally the same questions, but it doesn't make sense. You know, I remember I was doing a sort of a question and answer talk at the Harley Museum years ago. They wanted to do like this Friday night. They used to do these things at the museum on Friday nights where the public would come in and they have a guest speaker and then do a question and answer thing. So I went out and did it about motorcycles and film. And at the end, a woman and her son, who I think he was a junior or senior in high school, they're like, "This is my son. He wants to do what you do for a living. How does he do it?" And I'm like, I have no idea. I go, "Tell him to come work for me." And, you know, the kid actually got a hold of me and it never came together. But really, it's like, come work for me. We need people to work here, you know, because most people can't hang with the hours. Mm-hmm. And you could spend a month building a bike and the designer will come in on Friday and it's like, perfect, we're good. Come in Monday and go, right, we're painting it all a different color, frames too, rip everything out, you know, that kind of stuff. And these are the points where you just go like, okay, you know.
Yeah, you got to be able to roll with it. I could see that. And it's like, and same thing. It's like, I don't know. I feel like most people in their lives, people ask, how did you get there? And it's like, I don't know. There's these lines of occurrences that just happened. And this is where I am now.
Yeah, I think
but it is really fascinating.
You just let it happen and try not to steer too much. I think life puts you in the right place. And at least for me, it worked that way. And it seems to work out better if you don't fight it. You know. But yeah, I'm lucky to do this. I know it, and you know, it's funny that people find it interesting. You know, I know it's a niche little thing, but we go through periods here where it becomes. I get a lot of people asking me questions about it and different films, and I forget. I'm too comfortable in it to realize how interesting and lucky it is. You know what I mean? So I like doing this kind of stuff too, because, you know, I can talk about all these movies we did, and we covered like a tiny little bit of them. And you remember like, oh yeah, I remember on that we did this and this. And you realize that you have all these like great memories and experiences that are sort of only because I got lucky enough to have this happen. Yeah.
Well, I think it'd be hard too, because when it's occurring, you can't talk about it. It's only years later that you can reflect back on it and then talk to us about what actually happened.
We go into full lockdown mode on most movies. I mean, we're under contract. Nobody walks in the shop, you know, and my shop's not open to the public anyway, but I mean, we have to take that seriously and keep ourselves in lockdown, and, you know, and you can't, you know, you lose your job and your career now. Before, you know, with the internet, with the, you know, the instant, it's out there. Like it's tough to, you know, and there will be people like, "What are you working on?" Oh my God, I can't tell you, but it's so great, you know.